Nice decor. Very, minimalist. Huh. Mold. It looks pretty fresh.
With Halo Infinite delayed to who the hell knows when and no other Xbox exclusives coming anytime soon, console owners will likely look into the medium to give reason to dust off their new Xboxes and give it some well needed playtime. I mean, it's only been around 4 months since the console's release from Microsoft to release a AAA exclusive title, but is the medium the game to allow players to really indulge in this next-gen hardware, or is the medium, well, a mediocre attempt at what's been done before? Let's find out. My name is Nadge with the Nextgen broadcast, and welcome to my first video, the review of the medium.
I used to think everyone saw the world the way I did. Divided. Torn between two realities. But no. I was the only one. Or so I thought.
I adore horror games and the horror genre in general across all mediums, no pun intended, but it is perhaps the genre I myself am most critical with. Developers are constantly mistaking sublime horror for constant predictable jump scares, and more often than not, all classic cliches are being implemented into games for obvious story beats and idiotic character decisions, making those titles more frustrating than they are horrifying. It is quite a difficult genre to balance, I'll give it that, especially when horror can be so subjective. I mean, one thing I find terrifying you may find absolutely hilarious, although if you do find Uncle Phil's hide and seek in the dark hilarious, then we'll probably end up being terrified of you as well. However, when horror in video games is done well, those titles can be some of the most effective experiences a player can have, and there are a few titles that rank amongst the best in video games period, by effectively putting the player through a dread-infused journey. In some cases, it's the fear of the unknown, our own creations and our own imaginations that have the biggest impact, hopefully merged with excellent gameplay, world design, and the story that we walk the path of. The perfect balance is something that rarely comes to fruition, mind you. Whilst then, at times the medium can seem like it's going to be a breath of fresh air from your typical jump scare filled shooter, the game unfortunately relies too heavily on one side of a two-sided coin. Pretty ironic for a game that wants to indulge you in its intriguing themes of duality from both a story and a gameplay perspective. The medium is built upon a fascinating foundation, and at times really shows promise for a game that could sit amongst the great psychological horror titles, but it is let down by occasionally drab gameplay, a lack of overall creativity, and a protagonist whom is trampled under the weight of its great cast of supporting characters. Thankfully though, the baggage is pulled to the finish line by its well-told story, an underlying sense of dread and atmosphere throughout its roughly 8-hour-long story.
You startled me.
I did, didn't I? You look real scared.
Taking place in a post-communism Poland, we are introduced to our protagonist Marianne, a medium as she returns to her foster parents' funeral parlour after the death of her foster father. It is here we learn of her unique power of being able to experience life in two worlds, the real world and the spirit realm. After laying her foster father to rest in what is quite a heartfelt scene, Marianne receives a phone call from a mysterious man named Thomas, who reveals he knows all about her power, who she is, and summons her to Niwa, an abandoned holiday resort following a mysterious massacre which occurred years before. Intrigued by the knowledge Thomas holds relating to her power and a strange reoccurring dream Marianne seems to have, in which a young girl is shot at a lake, Marianne ventures to Niwa to find Thomas in hopes of getting the answers she so desperately craves. What follows is a story that surprised me in quite a lot of ways. The medium's greatest strength is the story it has to tell and the small cast of side characters that carries the load to its climax. All of the characters you meet initially kind of felt like they were tacked on and to flesh out the journey, but I was pleasantly surprised of how their stories and motives are all part of the bigger picture and had quite a significant impact on the overall plot and our protagonist. To name a few, you have Sadness, a spirit of a young girl who is lonely in the isolation of Niwa, but you're wondering, why is she here? You have Thomas, a guy with quite a complicated past who becomes somewhat of an anti-hero, someone on a questionable journey, but you think, would I have done the same if it were to prevent terrible events being set into motion? You will soon come to realise that the main theme here is duality. There are two sides to every person, and if pushed enough to the edge, the lines between those sides is shattered, blurring any clear indication of right and wrong, or real and illusion, whichever the case may be. As you learn more about these characters, you will empathise with them, as you discover their traumatic pasts, something all of the characters have. The game attempts to handle difficult themes such as child abuse and sexual assault, and I was surprisingly touched by what these characters had gone through and the decisions that had been made. What I really felt the medium did well was not to rub any of these taboo subjects in your face. The creative team decided to refrain from showing any of these visually, but the subtext and the dialogue and the clues around the game world really painted quite a good picture of the bleakness and harsh realities these characters have gone through. For me, this is good horror. The stories told and the pictures painted in our own imaginations. It all contributed to the sense of trepidation throughout the game. It's then a shame the main protagonist isn't as well written as the rest of the characters. For the majority of the game, she felt like that annoying stranger you sat next to on a mundane train ride from point A to B that you want to move away from, but you're just worried that she'll notice you never got off when she walks down the aisle to take a piss. She has this inner monologue that constantly chats to you, like Jesse Faden in Control, and like Jesse Faden in Control, some really dumb and annoying shit can be said, and it's all very expositional, telling you exactly what's happening on screen. And for me, she felt more of a way to get you through the story without really experiencing much of her own. Whilst this may not be the case in the end game, and I won't spoil the end of the game here, her involvement in the story for me just wasn't all that interesting until we got to the final stages of the game, which was a real shame as everything else happening around her was so captivating when it came to the story and the other characters. I think one reason why I didn't really get along with the character so well is because it goes back to those classic idiotic decisions in horror. Mary-Am has been a medium for some time now and is well aware of the hazards that come with her chosen career choice, but when she sees a large winged demon cowering in the corner of a room built from walls covered in human flesh, her first thought is to ask if it's okay, and then acts surprised when he grabs her by the throat and screams in her face with his big gaping mouth.
Hello? Are you alright?
Look at me!
I mean, by the end of the game, I suppose I kind of felt a little bit differently about her looking back on everything, but it just would have been nice to have a little bit more character to her earlier on and just know a bit more about her as a character and, well, be more interesting. But the praises do need to be sung for the game's story, and it goes along at a nice steady pace without much filler, which kept me invested throughout. But now I need to talk about the gameplay, and this is where the singing really comes to a halt. When I first saw the promotional material for the game, I thought the medium was going to be a survival horror, but that couldn't be any further from the truth. Listen, I don't want to bash the game for not being something I wanted it to be, but even vocaling my opinion on what it is, it's still a pretty disappointing experience. This is a slow-burning, story-driven experience in a borderline walking simulator / puzzle solver, or perhaps more in line with a very basic point-and-click adventure, and it doesn't really do either of those things very well. Before I get into specifics, incorporated in all this is the medium's unique next-gen feature, dual reality gameplay.
The split would come and go. If a place had a story to tell, well, I guess I was there to listen.
At times, Mary-Am had a migraine, accompanied by effects and a noise that will likely give you one as well, pulling her into the spirit world, transforming the world into a nightmarish alternate reality. The difference in the medium is that you will be exploring both worlds simultaneously. The concept is a compelling one, which creates an abundance of possibilities with some unique gameplay elements and puzzle solving. Unfortunately though, the potential is sorely wasted. The game does have its moments, but the feeling of how this just could have been so much more is just way too strong, and this is where the medium can really become the tedium. As you venture on your quest to discover the truth, exploration is the name of the game. You'll be exploring rooms to find clues, items, reading through documents and solving multiple puzzles to progress through the resort. There is no combat in the medium at all, unless parrying a few tentacles counts as something. The level design is linear. Exploration is a key element of the medium, but it holds your hand throughout the entire experience through corridors that lead you to one location, as everything else is conveniently blocked off. At no point are you able to explore large sections of the resort. It would have been pretty cool to have a little bit more free reign. Think the apartment or hospital from Silent Hill 2, or the Resident Evil mansion if you want to go big. I don't like to compare the medium to those games too much, because it is clearly not one of those games, nor is it really trying to be, but again it just goes back to the unused potential of the dual world mechanic. Imagine exploring various locations throughout the resort, comparing the differences between the two, via the split screen, piecing together the mystery of the resort. Well, this is what you do, but on a very basic scale. You will be advancing through the resort in both the real and the spirit worlds. One door may be locked in the real world, but in the spirit world it is wide open, allowing you to send your spirit conscious through to look for a key or an alternative way in. You do have a small arsenal of abilities at hand, an eagle vision-like ability to see clues in hidden spiritual footsteps, and a force field that allows you to block off those tentacles I showed you earlier, and also swarms of butterflies. The locations themselves are pretty bland, with constant greys in the real world. I kept thinking to myself this is meant to be a resort, an abandoned one yes, but it doesn't really have anything I would write home about on Trustpilot. But that being said, it does have atmosphere. Part of that is due to the music and the sound design, which complements the eerie setting fantastically. The music, even if there isn't anything particularly exciting happening on screen, helps keep up the tension and the feeling maybe something may happen, and contributes to the feeling something terrible has happened here before. The music is composed by Akira Yamaoka, the guy behind the Silent Hill soundtrack, so there is no doubt talent behind the medium score. As you explore, you will find scattered items around that have a connection to a spirit, something that has happened in the past to really help build the lore and story. These can work quite well in building the feeling that this place was once lived in. The puzzles we get are just way too simplistic. When I was first introduced to the dual world puzzles, I was super excited for the possibilities that may lie ahead. Puzzles in video games have become pretty easy now, generally speaking, and with this new dual feature, I thought I could be in for a few treats, feeling like an egghead put to the challenge. Overall, I think I had to stop and scratch my head a total of 2 times throughout the entire playthrough, both being only for a brief moment, and they were moments of stupidity on my part as opposed to well-designed puzzles. Puzzles normally consist of you finding a way to power some kind of mystical electrical source or generator, or finding items to progress through, you guessed it, more blocked corridors and rooms. There were a couple of moments I thought the game was building me up to a boss battle, tense moments and revelations in the story with creepy as hell creature designs. With there being no combat in the game, there still could have been some pretty well designed boss encounters with your mind and a puzzle as the weapons of choice, but all these moments just ended prematurely with a quick cutscene instead. It was very disappointing in the moment, like a fun date building up for a good 10 minutes, only to walk out before you've got your tangled trousers off of your ankles. The game is played in a third person perspective from a fixed camera angle accompanied by tank controls. Me personally, I didn't really have a problem with this. Kind of reminds me of the horror games of old, and it sets some pretty picturesque moments. But I know some people won't enjoy this accompanied with the tank controls as it can be a bit fiddly. And to be honest, the camera setup did cause some problems for me and technical issues throughout the game. The frame rate at times was terrible. If the camera would change angle as I entered a different room, the frame rate seems like it was trying to catch up at times and figure out which angle it had been programmed to go for. Even worse, however, was the frame rate in some of the game's few chase sequences. It just couldn't keep up with the action on screen at times. This doesn't happen too often, as there only being a handful of them in the game, maybe 3 to 4 throughout, and these usually start with a stealth sequence as the game's antagonist Moore, a demon in the spirit realm, stalks and hunts Marianne as she explores Niwa, craving the human skin on her bones to wear as clothing. Ring any bells?
Put the fucking lotion in the basket!
Moore is voiced by the in everything Troy Baker, but he was quite unrecognisable as Moore, which made a nice change from every game featuring Bruce Wayne from Batman vs Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and he definitely pulled off a creepy vibe and added to the tension and atmosphere of the game when the character was present. When it comes to the medium, I too find myself on the line of duality. On one hand, we have a well-told story, some deeply written characters, even if a little cliche at times, and a world that is more often than not dripping with a layer of atmosphere and tension. But the game clearly wants you to indulge in its new gameplay mechanic, and the main premise of that is just way too simplistic. I should be talking about what is here in the game, but there really isn't much, and the promise of a true next-gen psychological experience with the new technology that allowed you to play the game world simultaneously is just not fulfilled and leaves a lot to be desired. What is here can be interesting and a little fun at times when its core strengths work in unison, but they never really reach the full potential this game has. Everything in this game is pretty much laid out for you. It is clear that the vision of this game was to tell you a very precise story in a very precise way, which can be fine. And if that works for you and all you want to do is experience an interesting story, then sure, I could recommend this game. However, if you like more meat with your potatoes when you are looking at a menu that promises you a slap-up meal, we need strong gameplay that accompanies the strong foundation for a complete package. Like Niwa, the core gameplay premise itself feels abandoned with many of its ideas left on the editing room floor, and with that I can't help but be left with a lingering feeling of disappointment. I kind of feel like this game is definitely worthy of a sequel, and if they learn a lot from this game and really advance the dual reality premise, this could really be something special to sit amongst the great horror franchises. But for now, this is what we have, and one can only hope that next time the team at Bloober aren't afraid to do a little bit more experimenting with their own experiment. Anyway, that's it from me. I hope you enjoyed the review. If you did, stick around, consider liking the video and subscribing for more, and don't forget, this was just my opinion. Did you like the game? Did you hate it? Let me know in the comments below, but most importantly, stay safe, and thanks for tuning in to the Next Gen broadcast. Until next time.